Good evening. Good evening. Good evening and welcome to the Rochester Community Schools Board of Education work session called to order at 6:08. We are going to say the Pledge of Allegiance, but right after that, we are honored tonight to have Olivia and Greta, who are from West, who will be singing our national anthem. So please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you so much, Olivia and Greta. That was awesome. This Board of Education work session is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not a public community meeting. However, there is a time for public participation during the meeting. General public comment will be heard under item 6.1 tonight. If you wish to speak and have not already filled out a yellow card, they're located on a table near the entrance to the media center. Once you've completed the card, please hand it to a safe ed officer in a yellow shirt. Please note that the cards must be completed prior to speaking. I will call the names of those who I have a card for during public comment. When addressing the board, you will have 3 minutes to speak, and we'll let you know when you have 30 seconds remaining. Please be mindful of this time limit. When addressing the board, we ask that you state your name in relationship to the district. Please address your comments to the entire board and not to individual board members, school district employees, or to members of the audience. The board will not be responding to comments or questions during the meeting. However, someone will follow up if needed. We also reserve the right to exclude from our meeting an individual who engages in conduct that constitutes a breach of the peace. To my board colleagues, I would like to remind everyone to please be respectful of each other and our administrators. The specific language can be found under Board Bylaw 0139.5 and 0139.6. On behalf of my colleagues on the board, we are grateful to be able to serve this community and appreciate your support. For roll call, all board members are present. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Moved by Trustee Gupta. Is there support? By Trustee Blake. Any discussion on this? All those in favor of approving the agenda as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That's a 7-0 vote, and the agenda is adopted. Agenda item 4.0 is where we reference communications that have been received. Item 4.1 is communications received by the board. Secretary Gupta, would you give us an update?
Sure. At this time, 12 communications have been received and are in the packet for reference.
Thank you. 4.2 is citizens requesting placement on the agenda, and Kimberly Lopez has requested placement this evening. If anyone is interested in requesting placement in the future, there's a form under the Board of Education on our website. Those requests are due by noon, 3 business days prior to our meeting, which would be a Wednesday for a Monday night meeting. Ms. Lopez, if you'd like to go ahead.
Good evening. I would like to share with you something very special that we do at McGregor Elementary School. It is unique to our school. Our music teacher, Jolene Platsky, does full-scale musical theater productions with our 4th and 5th graders. This year we are doing The Wizard of Oz tomorrow night. In previous years, we've done Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and The Lion King. I have the privilege of working side by side with Mrs. Platsky every day after school, and what she is able to accomplish is really incredible. I have worked for many professional theater companies in my past. Therefore, I can honestly say that I am so impressed with the level of professionalism that is required of these kids. If they want to be part of this production, the expectations are high, and they thrive in that challenge. These full-scale productions are done in an elementary school cafeteria, so you can imagine the technical limitations. But we are so supported by our administration and PTA, and our community works hard together to make it work. Even alumni, meaning middle schoolers, come back to help, and they are excited to do so. My 8th grader is running sound. These young kids learn every aspect of production. They learn how to be stage managers, lighting crew, sound crew, hair and makeup, as well as actors, singers, and dancers. And in so doing, they receive the many benefits of theater. As I said, the expectations are high. What many people don't know is that kids in theater are treated like adults in theater. Theater is not for the faint of heart. Not everyone gets a trophy, but what is so cool to see is that these kids rise to the occasion. They appreciate that respect and responsibility. They learn how to do their part with excellence because it takes everybody working hard and doing their absolute best, or the show falls apart. This is what theater teaches you: to work together towards a vision, to listen to each other. Listening is the most important thing you have to do during a show. I appreciate our district's support of the arts. My older kids have been involved in high school productions, which have blown me away. And summer music theater is an institution. It's going on 50 years. But working with Jolene has taught me that the younger kids are capable.
30 seconds.
And they learn so much through theater arts as well. I encourage us to provide something for them as well. Maybe a summer music theater junior. Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item 4.3 is the section where members of the Board of Education share communications that were shared directly with them and were not sent to the full board. Did any board member receive communications from the public? Trustee Annis?
I received communication and spoke with the following individuals: Skye Teeton, Emily Mueller, and Jennifer Lagerbaum.
Did anyone else? Okay. Well, then we are moving on to our work session piece, and our work session this evening is 5.1 is our strategic plan review, and Mr. Scott Fuller from G&D Associates, who the board contracted with to help with our strategic planning process, is here tonight to review some survey results and to update the community on where we are in the process. How are you this evening, Mr. Fuller?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Thanks so much. Is that I have to push? I've seen you all make that mistake, so no judgment. I'm doing well, thanks. I had the opportunity to spend the day talking to stakeholders throughout your district. So we started sometime in the 7s this morning, which is the middle of the night, in my opinion. But we did get to start there with some staff members and got to talk to some middle school students today. Looking forward to more student conversations, community group, and some of your committees as well today. So all really positive conversations and getting deeper into perspective that actually leads us to the survey work, able to dig deeper into some of the results there. So thanks for your time today. Thanks for everybody's support. I'd be remiss if I didn't point out everybody sitting at this table, and then plus some behind your command center over there and in back that really did a lot of work to help organize the time and days and get people there. So I very appreciated. I do want to just start out with some discussions about the process itself. So talking about strategic planning, and I know we've talked about this several times, but what are some of the inputs we're using to get you to a strategic plan that you can operationalize in the district? And so that first bit, our process is to really spend a lot of time digging deep into who you are as a district and where you've been. We had the opportunity shortly after board approval to dig into a lot of your data, a lot of the information you shared, initiatives that are currently going on in the district, but also past initiatives as well. We use that to create an initial survey question bank that I know you're aware of. We shared that initial question bank with the trustees for feedback and adjustment. And the way we frame that is this is a starting point, and please add, subtract, change wording, let us know what it needs to be to fit the needs of your community. We had, I believe, 13 suggestions that came from trustees. We were able to accommodate 11 of those suggestions around questions. 2 that we were unable to accommodate. One, there wasn't a consensus to move forward amongst the board with, so we didn't include the question. And then the second item was just more of a clarification about tracking grade bands of employees that were answering the question. And since it was employees, a wider net of employees rather than just your classroom teachers, we didn't track that value. So the rest we were able to come to consensus to after feedback and some suggestions around wording adjustment. Then we'll move into, after this, what I'm doing this week, we're moving into interviews and focus groups with folks. I know I had a chance to interview each of you one-to-one via Zoom, and that was very helpful. We also had that same opportunity with executive cabinet to talk to everybody one-to-one and just interview them about the process coming forward, what your hopes and hesitations were around different things, and get your perspective. And that's what we're doing all week with a wide variety of community members. I know there's always some questions about how those were selected, and I know we included the link in the survey at the end of the survey. We noted it at the beginning of the survey as well that there would be a link to sign up for focus groups should people want to do that. We also asked all of you for recommendations. We were able to accommodate every recommendation that you put forward as far as offering a slot and your alternatives as well. And we were actually able to accommodate everybody that signed up as well. And I know we've even had some people express interest past that. So we are collecting those names, and even people that were unable to make the time that they were assigned. And I'm happy to talk about that so that we can connect with them either remotely or by phone, one-to-one, or as a group, because we want to make sure we get anybody that wants to talk to us, we want to hear from. That perspective is important to us. And then, of course, we have the community forum this week as well, where we can do some future-focused thinking that'll help inform the district vision and strategic plan going forward. But the biggest thing I want to talk about in this process is the opportunity for feedback along the way. And we said this in our initial interview, that this is really built in phases. That initial research phase, community engagement phase, visioning phase, and then a strategic planning phase. After each phase, there will always be a product for you to respond to feedback on, and ask questions about. We think that's important. And especially as we get into visioning and strategic planning, that's where we're going to really rely on you all to get that feedback. My recommendation is you going out and putting the products in front of the people that we're doing focus groups with and getting their thoughts on it so we can sign off on it, make any adjustments that need to be made so that we can get to a product that we have true consensus on, not full agreement, because that's not necessarily what consensus means. We understand it's nearly impossible to get full agreement on anything everywhere with anything. So that's just kind of the norm. but coming to that consensus where we have something we feel good about, this is the direction. We may have questions about how we get that done, but that's where the strategic planning piece comes into play. And then obviously we'll provide several recommendations about how to roll that out and what we've seen effective around the country, especially with districts that are similar to you in size, but also makeup with that. So getting into the community survey specifically, a couple things I really wanted to talk about, that question development and rationale. I talked about the development already a little bit. The rationale behind the types of questions that are on there is, and we said this in our interview, and I believe we said it in our proposal as well, that we believe a community survey around visioning and strategic planning is really good for one thing, and it's figuring out better questions to ask and deeper questions to ask. That's the type of data we were looking for. What types of themes are coming up that we need to learn more about from your stakeholders and get their different perspective about it? It's not meant to be an all-inclusive, let's ask every individual issue that the district may be considering, every individual initiative they may be considering. Certainly that stuff comes up in the open-ended questions, and it's certainly already coming up in our focus groups, which is good because in those situations we have opportunity to ask follow-ups and more nuanced questions. And I'll give you an example. One thing we hear often, whether it be from your district or anywhere, is a lot of people using the phrasing, our teachers need support, which fair enough. I doubt anybody on this board would push back and say, no, our teachers don't need support. On a survey, it's harder to get to a question that says, well, what does support mean to you? What does that look like? What is actual meaningful support, authentic supports versus more performative supports that you wouldn't really appreciate, to make sure that you put your time, effort, dollars, resources into the right things. And that's why we value this week higher than anything that we're going to do with you. This is really the meat of our process. And the survey, again, helps us get there so we know what questions to come in with. And I would, today was a great day. I look forward to the rest of the week, and I would encourage you to ask people of all opinions and all backgrounds how they felt it went as well, because that's a huge part of what we do as well. Don't take our word for it. Ask the people working with us that have had the chance to talk to us, see what we do, and experience the work themselves without assumption. Important to note these next two bullets, that the survey is a snapshot. We cannot recommend, nor would we recommend, that you take it as this is our definitive reality. This is the be-all, end-all. That's not how it was designed. That was never our stated purpose behind it. As I said, our purpose was what themes do we need to dig deeper into in our focus groups. Also, just keep in mind, this is one of several inputs. The survey data is important. It's one piece of many pieces. And this is, I think in my conversations with all of you, there are some times when I'm going to ask you to trust the process, because it's a different process than what most of you have probably been through to arrive at a vision and strategic plan. I'm not claiming it's better. I'm not claiming it's worse. It's different. And so it does have multiple pieces. And our experience with board members, administrators, community is the deeper you get into the process, the more light bulbs go off. Oh, I see why you did that. Okay, yep, you told us that. I was skeptical, but I stuck it out, and I see the rationale behind that. That's not to say you shouldn't ask questions. As I've said in all of your focus groups today, I think I've told all of you this individually. We think questions are an indicator of a healthy organization, and the space to ask them. I'll always answer them the best I can. If I don't know, I'll tell you I don't know, and I'll try to figure it out for you or point you to the right person who can. And also, I'm open to pushback, again, because we shouldn't be sitting here if we can't handle that pushback. We might not come to an agreement on where things are, what should be done, and we accept that. We feel very comfortable with our process. We know it's a good process and it works because I can point you and give you phone numbers of people to call, and they'll tell you what it's done. So again, don't take my word for it, but it's also based in a proven change model that we've built it around. Again, it's just that idea of, remember the context of the survey, and this is just the beginning, tip of the iceberg, one piece. It was meant to be a broader net so that we could get more specific and drill down with each layer of this work. Any questions so far? I want to make sure I give space. Certainly, I'm going to give you all the space you need at the end of this too, but I want to make sure I create the space now if you have any burning questions.
At this time, is it too late for someone to join a focus group if they're interested?
In my opinion, it's not. So if we don't have, we'd like to keep them to a certain number within those. I'd have to go back to my schedule to look at where the open spaces are. But in addition to that, we have committed, I know there were a handful of people that couldn't be reached for their time, whether it was voicemail messages were left, and I know there's a record of that. Emails were sent, but who knows if they went into spam folders, things like that. We recognize that can happen. So we are committed to holding some virtual online, whether those need to be one-to-one conversations with people or a couple options for group Zooms, hi Lori, group Zooms to engage in a focus group.
And if I can, good question. We are recommending that community members just send a talk to RCS, and we'll do everything we can to try and get them in.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess one other question I had, so we received the results of the survey and we have some great pie charts with information. And I asked about the written comments part of the
Yeah.
survey because the board wasn't able to see the full written comments.
Yeah.
And I wonder, why did we have written comments as part of the survey if we weren't going to be able to see a copy of all of the written comments?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and one that we address the same way each time. We find a lot of value in those open-ended questions because it gives us a real flavor again of what some of the hot button issues that we need to be sure to come and have a discussion about when we're on site, be able to follow up and get specifics about. And certainly, again, those are surfacing. The reason we don't hand over the raw data to say we had 2,614 responses to this open-ended question, for instance, what programming should start in the district. One of the reasons we believe that you hired a third party to do this was to help manage the process and manage the data so that there's a lot of confidentiality that comes into getting good survey data and good focus group data. It's why we draw a line when people say, oh, I'd love to be a fly on the wall in your focus group. And I'm in the position to say, can't have it. I cannot have you in that room. I can't have principals in rooms with people they evaluate. I cannot have board members in when I'm talking to community members. I can't have district administrators in when I'm talking to district office staff, for instance. So there's a confidentiality piece, especially because if I handed that to you, I'm trying to think of, it's definitely the majority of them have names, references to specific schools or departments, and those names are inclusive of other community members, sometimes students, certainly all of you all, and I will say, none of you, I know, big shock, right? None of you are exempt from being named, and that's not always a negative thing, but the fact remains, we don't believe it honors the confidentiality we promised in process as a company. It doesn't align with our values to give you all those names and information where people are being fairly specific and sometimes in some colorful language as well, because once we hand it over to you, it becomes a matter of public record. And again, we're not comfortable with that confidentiality wise, and that's why we're a third party and we handle that. I understand the desire to read it though, because I'm a curious person and I would want to know.
Well, I guess one of the reasons that I ask is I would wonder if there was a way to provide that but redact any personally identifying information, because as a board member, I'm assuming we hire the company to distribute the survey on behalf of the board so that we can look at it and look for patterns, not to look at individual responses, but
Yeah.
so that we too can see what are these hot button issues that keep coming up,
Yeah.
where are areas of concern. One reason I bring it up is because I was talking with board members in a neighboring district who went through the strategic planning process, and they said, make sure to ask for the raw data, because, and I don't think you're doing this, I really don't get that impression at all, but with their company, they were displeased with the company that they used. And they said their company presented the data to them in a way to fit a particular narrative and filtered out responses that they knew were submitted.
Yeah.
And they were disappointed in that. And so it's just a way that, I appreciate how you've aggregated the data for
Yeah.
us, but it would be nice to be able to look through that and verify, what sorts of things we're seeing as we scan through the comments too.
Yeah,
So that's why I would bring up that question, since, the board is responsible for this.
Yeah,
And we're
it-
supposed to be the connection with the community, and we're trying to regain trust with the community.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I take all that on board, and we can certainly, if it's the desire of the board, look at some redacted things. I will warn you, it would be a lot of black with some, with some words sticking out of it. My preference, if I'm being honest, is to have individual conversations, and if there's specific information you all want to know. I think I have a track record, and I appreciate you putting that qualifier in there about us and putting your trust in us. I think we've demonstrated we're happy to answer very specific and pointed questions from any of you, and I'm certainly happy to do that. And if you're wanting to dig deeper into certain initiatives, certain comments, certain hot button issues, I would love to have that conversation, absolutely. And if it means we need, it'd be a significant chunk of work, because we're talking about thousands, literally thousands of open-ended responses that we'd have to go through. So again, my preference would be to have the conversations to empower you with the information you need to not only to satisfy your own wants for knowledge, but also to, if you have constituents that are curious or wanting more information, I take that on board as well. So we certainly want to get you the information you need.
Trustee Alsbach?
I was just curious about the level of response rate. It seemed like it was a really small sample. I've worked in very large districts that, get 80 to 90% response rates from faculty and from students and parents. And I wonder if you can speak to if this response rate is typical and,
Yeah.
again, I was really disappointed in the number of responses.
Okay. Yeah, for this type of work and our experience with districts your size, this is actually more response than we typically get. So you had a higher response. I will share that the one area I wish we would have had more response from was the employee group. That was a little lower than typical. And at the same time, that's data in itself potentially. So that helps us even walking in with questions, focus groups with your employee groups to ask around that and see if we can tease some of that out. But no, as far as response goes, I will share that you have more responses than most your size, and we're talking to more people in district, many more people than we typically do when we visit districts your size.
Well, I do wonder if we could maybe get what was the total number of surveys sent out? For example, you've got some employee, how many employees got the survey? I see in the sample where it says how many responded, but I don't know how many it went out to.
Well, the structure for it going out was shared links, and I believe a sticker was purchased to go on a local periodical publication that went out that had the link, social media, newsletter, things like that. So we didn't, as a company, we didn't send the survey out. We didn't target email addresses or anything like that. There's a rationale behind us not sending things. One is nobody knows who Scott Fuller from G&D Associates is, and we're either going to go to spam or we're going to be treated as spam. And if we make phone calls, kind of the same thing. I'm going to come up as some Colorado number. And it's usually somebody thinking I'm trying to extend a auto warranty that they didn't even know they had or something like that. So all we can really report from our end is the response we got. Correct.
Question back to the data.
Yeah.
Can we get the raw number data turned over? Again, so I actually don't think the pie charts are the most useful way, so I would like to be able to Pareto the data out in different ways. Again, I'm not looking for any of the words.
Sure.
But I would just like to get the raw number data just to see, because again, I think it can be presented in a better way that is just a little more insightful from the pie charts.
Yeah, I put it all in the spreadsheet.
So, yeah, would you prefer that question by question in, say, a table or something like that? Is
Yeah,
that-
just an Excel document. That way I can Pareto it out how I want to.
Sure, we can
Thank
do
you.
that.
As a follow-up, I appreciate the pie charts.
It's we all have, just like our students all have different learning needs and preferences. We believe in personalization. So happy to get the tables and in a chart, happy to provide pie charts. Don't ask me to create other charts, please. I mean, we will, but I won't love it. Yeah, that's definitely doable. We'll definitely probably need next week or something to get to that. Okay, great, thank you.
Do you have something you're doing this week, Scott?
I'm fairly scheduled this week, and so yeah, and there's something next week as well, I believe. So, but yes, we will get that to you. Any other questions at this stage? Okay, great. So getting into some of the themes, and this is where, again, one of the processes we use to do this work is we look at themes independently in our company as a team, and then we bring back themes together. So we look at individual analysis of that, see where we come back on the same page, if we interpret it the same way, see where we didn't, and then we try to red team it. Are you all familiar with the red teaming process? So a red team process really comes from journalism, where before a story goes out, you're meant to bring that story to colleagues or other people and have them attempt to shoot holes in it. And so that's what we do. We actually bring our own individual perspectives looking at the data and how we synthesize that, and then we try to shoot holes in each other's approach to that till we get to a place where we have consensus and feel really good about this is what the survey data actually said. We feel comfortable that multiple people have had a chance to look at it and interpreted it in that way, and these are the main themes that came out of it. Again, happy to dig in deeper to any of the themes as you process, as you continue to look through things. I think you all know we've said from the beginning, reach out anytime and we'll connect with you and help get through that any way we can. So I'm just going to go through some of the high level ones, and then we'll get to what next steps and then open it up for questions, obviously. So main survey themes, and these were ones that came up over and over and over again and were pretty universal across all groups. Certainly individual groups had some different themes that were specific to them. You know, when you think about community members that don't have students in your schools, there were certainly some different themes there. When you think about community members with school-age children that choose not to send kids to your schools, they certainly had different perspectives as well that we shared in a deeper report. So what we're sharing here came across all groups that we wanted to dig deeper into. First is, I think one thing to recognize whenever you do a survey or whenever you're talking to people is acknowledge that there are good things going on. And I don't say that as a, well, I'll just throw that out to everybody. That's not true everywhere we go. And we don't say it if we don't mean it. So we always say if you get a compliment from us, take it and run with it, because we don't give them out easily. There was an acknowledgement across the board of success in this district, both current and past success. And it often qualified or was a preamble to, and this is what I would like to see different, or, and here's what I'm experiencing now. But I think it's important to call out that acknowledgement of success. People specifically have called out your educators as being dedicated, student-focused. They appreciate that and doing good work. I think that's important. I'm not just saying that because there's a sea of red over here to my left. Nobody told me it was red for ed today, guys. But that's important. Also, just some of the initiative work that's being attempted throughout the district, inclusive of yourselves. And again, nobody was exempt from these types of comments. To say you are either appreciated or I wish they would get their act together. But every one of you was appreciated in comments and named, and I think that's important to point out as well. Because it's easy to get lost in the weeds of this is really tough work. There's a lot of hot button things going on, and very rarely do we take the time to sit back and say, okay, and we're doing good things. It's not but, it's and. There's a readiness to move forward. People want to move forward, and they're cautiously optimistic about this process and what it could mean for the district. One thing that's come up already in focus groups, and you'll hear me say a lot, is, because I know in the state, you're considered a large district. And this is a large district, and people said, we're a really big district, Scott. On a national perspective, who we work with, you're big enough to matter and small enough to get it done. And that's important. That's a huge opportunity because your size really works to your advantage in the state because you have the opportunity to get people to listen to the right things and see great practice happening and get people to replicate that practice. And that's what a proper vision and strategic plan should do. It should help people take notice and with the transparency to share the impact of what you're doing, not just platitudes about it, but the actual impact and how we're measuring that impact. People are ready for collaboration and people are ready to be part of conversations. And, you know, I came from a community focus group and I won't divulge what we talked about there, but what I can say is not everybody agreed on all the issues in there. And it was a really healthy conversation. And I appreciate that. And people are ready for that at all levels. And they want to see that collaboration. And again, it's not one person being blamed, two people being blamed, or saying it's the responsibility of everyone. And that's how it's framed in almost all of the comments we saw there. This is everyone's responsibility to pull this together and take advantage of the opportunity we have. One of the biggest challenges that was communicated, especially from educators throughout the district, but also with parents and caregivers, was the need to really focus on how do we address individual needs, whether those are needs of students with IEPs, 504 plans, special education students, whether that was the needs of our students who are high achieving or identified as gifted and need different opportunities there, whether that was more cultural and social needs, that's called out quite a bit as well. So but it's that recognition of we have individuals here, and that came through loud and clear again when talking to students today. They're experiencing that struggle, and it's not because people aren't trying, it's not because people aren't working really hard. It's about having the structures and systems to make sure it's cohesive and everybody's on the same page, and there's a very clear system of supports for all of our kids, no matter what those needs are. How do we respond to them? Whether that's something we can actually respond to as a district and as employees of the district, or whether that's something where our responsibility is to connect our families or our students with the right wraparound services that we're not qualified to provide, or it's actually not our role to provide, and certainly those types of things exist. So that was, again, brought out loud and clear as we'd like this to be a focus moving forward, and we're really interested in how you'll address that. Again, we're asking a lot deeper questions this week about these things. So know that there will be more details to come about what this actually all means, but we're collecting that now, and I'm not comfortable sharing exactly what's being said after one day of 4. So, but I'll take any question you have too. Curriculum resources and deep learning, and I'll talk a little bit about that. It won't be a surprise to anybody that literacy is a hot topic. It was a hot topic in the survey. It's already been a topic in focus groups. I anticipate that to continue, and people really wanting curriculum resources that they feel are supporting the work. Again, it goes back to the last bullet of what individual students need. And there are lots of opinions out there about that and what specifics are. I'm not here to tell you or push you into any curriculums or anything. But it is clear that people are looking for something different. That's clear. And again, it doesn't present as a political item here. People are looking for something different that aligns with the beliefs and goals of the district. And I think that's important to call out. Deep learning, I know there's deep learning work going on in the district, and when we talk about the 6 C's, that is stuff that's come out, again, across all groups of what types of skills. Yes, we need to focus on basic academic skills in core subject areas, and there's a whole nother set of skills that we feel students need to be successful beyond school. And that's where that comes in. So some of the questions we're asking about that is specifically what skills do you feel those are, but also asking about people's personal experiences with having those skills, not having those skills, and how that's affected them. And I'm really interested in how people are developing those skills. It's a question we ask all of your students. How are those skills, they bring them up. How is that being developed in you intentionally? So we look forward to being able to share some of those responses out as well. Safe, healthy, and innovative environments, that wraps a lot of things in, I know. So first, safety was spoken to several times in two different ways. One is just security, physical security of buildings, presence of security, and just making sure that when we send our kids to school, we are confident they are in the safest environment for learning. So that's number one. And people certainly have mountains of suggestions, which is really, really important. I'll come back to that in a few minutes. The other safety piece goes back to what we're talking about with that social safety, emotional safety, just safety. And look, when we talk about inclusion, do I have opportunities? And again, I think it's important to define inclusion here. What are we talking about? Because we're not talking about a program. I'm not talking about a program. It's about how do we get inclusive services for our gifted students, our accelerated students, for our students with IEPs, for our students of different socioeconomic backgrounds, different racial backgrounds. All of this was brought up in the terms of safe and healthy schools. So there's a lot there, and we are digging into that, but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention all of those different things. We're not getting people talking about it in a programmatic way, which I think is interesting because sometimes it is. There's certainly some different pushback in your reports about perceptions about what different things are. And we think there's an opportunity there to, again, define very clearly what it is you mean when you say things and what you don't mean when you say things. It's kind of like goes back to that support thing. What do you mean and what don't you mean? So getting beyond buzzwords and talking about what that actually means to you, we think is really critical. And that's what this process is actually meant to do. So we can get a vision that's actually comprehensive and paints that picture. And then the other bit that I need to bring up with safe, healthy, and innovative environments, there's really two bits, and it relates more to your employees. One is a real disparity in work-life harmony. I'll just be blunt. People express that we talk about it, we encourage self-care, we say the words, we're not sure the structures are in place to actually make that happen. And I'll share one of my own beliefs here because this is how we live as a company. Work-life harmony and balance, or whatever you want to call it, is only as good as what the conversations you're willing to have around it. So we can talk about it, but one of the things my boss tells me, and he said this publicly in front of hundreds of people, is if I found out Scott was working over X number of hours consistently in a week, I would stop paying for his health insurance. Now, some people gasp when he says that. What a mean British man he is. He is, but not because of, no, I'm kidding, he's not. I love where I work. I love that because it models an expectation. He lives it, we live it. Work life ebbs and flows. There are times when you're going to be busier and put more hours in. You have to intentionally make up for that. And we believe in a district, if you're going to talk about safe and healthy environments and self-care and recruitment and retention of staff and avoiding burnout and making sure, if we're all about kids, that our people are showing up as their best selves, then we need to attend to this in the same way we would attend to it if a math teacher decided not to teach math anymore. It's the same conversation. And we need to provide strategies for how to get better at it and coaching and support to help people get there. So I'll get off my soapbox on that one, but it was a big deal. It came up a lot in the survey, and it was the overarching theme with employees, if I'm honest. And so I have to bring it up. Then just the innovative environments. There's a recognition that, and it really depends, that creative thinking's encouraged in some spots and then not so much in other spots. So just getting some cohesiveness about what innovation means. And I'll give you an example of that just from my own experience. One thing we always used to talk about when people talk about innovation is we'd ask the question again, what do you mean by that? Because not everything's innovative, and that's okay. Not everything needs to be innovative. But also, what's the difference between doing something kind of on the fly because you think you had a good idea versus responsible innovation and responsible risk-taking? What's the planning structures for that to go in? What are the communication structures that go into something like that so that people know what you're attempting to do, what impact you're looking to have, what outcomes you're meant to have? And so just making sure those structures are in place. I don't know whether you have those structures or not. I'm just sharing what we heard and something that we want to put on your radar. If you have structures, so we can either more effectively communicate those or share with people. And if you don't, great. This is a perfect opportunity to start thinking. That's what this work is about. What do we need to get in place? Okay. Unsure responses. And you look through the pie charts and soon-to-be tables and as well. There's a lot of uncertainty out there about different things. From program offerings. I know one we pointed out about after-school type opportunities and enrichment type opportunities for our students. There's a higher level of awareness for employees with children versus I'm not an employee and I have children in your district. So how do we close that gap about certainty there? Things like CTE type programs, career technical education, vocational type education programs, which are important things, and that came out loud and clear as well. But there seems to be less awareness about that sort of work and the impact and potential it has for students. So those are the types of things. We're not going to be able to close all those understanding gaps in our 4 days here, which is why we want to put it on your radar, because the last bit here is continued engagement. People are, like I said, cautiously optimistic and excited about the opportunity you are presenting them with this week and through the survey. And look, I know it doesn't fit everyone's needs all the time, but pretty universally people are excited that, okay, we're glad the board's given us this opportunity. They voted 7-0 on something, and we're actually pushing it forward and doing it. And that's not disparaging to you. I think this is healthy conversation. So my encouragement, and we'll talk about this throughout the whole process, and we'll even provide as much structure for this and examples as you like or need, or none if you feel like you've got it, is how do you continue this level of engagement consistently? That's important. The conversations with our students that we were able to have, and one of them sang the national anthem here this evening, and she was like, hey, I'm singing the national anthem. And it was fantastic. But they've all walked out appreciative, like, I'm glad we're being asked these questions. This is so good. What happens next? And so I'm very honest about what happens next, which is, I'm not sure, but here's what I'm going to tell your district. And so I'm fulfilling that promise that I've made to students today, I've made to your employees and community members today, and I'll continue to make throughout the week of this is something that needs to continue. You don't need to hire us to do it. You're welcome to, but you don't have to. But how are we consistently getting this information? How are we making space for these discussions? And they're not always easy discussions. Some of these questions and some of these themes we're asking about are tough questions. And it makes people uncomfortable, and you can see it in their body language. And that's okay. But again, it comes back, one of our norms is about respectful disagreement. And so honest discourse is good. It's how it's conducted that's the difference maker. And so getting to that place where we are in a position, we have the structures, and it's not dependent on any one or two people, that this is something that continues. Engaging your retired citizens, your citizens that choose not to send kids to your schools, and trying to figure out why. And one of the questions we asked was, what could we do to get you back? And some people, you have the list. Some people listed things, and some people said, nothing, we're beyond that. But that's good information for us to know too. That's needed. Students. A lot of people, I think, Debbie, you asked early in this process, where do students come into play? Especially elementary students come into play. And I had the opportunity to visit 2 elementary schools today, and more throughout the week. Students have a huge piece of this when we get to a strategic plan document, because we believe they should be part of the teams implementing that work. They should be part of the feedback loops consistently to ensure the impact we are intending actually happens. If we're not engaging them regularly in authentic ways, not just what do you think, but hard questions, giving them the space to give us hard questions and push back, then it's the equivalent of going to a restaurant to review it and only asking the chef how the food is. We have to ask the customer, the people eating the food. And so if you walk away with nothing tonight from what I'm saying, please, students at all levels involved in the implementation of this, but ask them how you're doing. They will tell you. That's why I love talking to students. They are brutally honest. And I love that. That's what I do. So I'll move on to next steps, and I'll open it up to your questions, obviously. So where do we go from here? Obviously, this is what our week looks like, and we kicked all this off actually with interviews one-to-one with you, and as I said, the executive cabinet. We'll continue these. We also have a list of recent graduates that came from you all, but also some other interests that we actually have listed, and we'll be scheduling a virtual opportunity for them to jump on. And again, that's not just going to be one opportunity, take advantage or lose it. We'll offer up the same as we have to everybody else. If you need an individual phone call, if you want to share something with us, or if you can jump on one of these 2 Zoom times, that would be helpful too. We're going to talk to them as well. That's the only group we're not getting to this week, I believe. And we open up the end of every focus group, I've offered that up as well. I've left my business card and said, just reach out, and made it clear that that's what we're here for. I think we've demonstrated that you can reach out as much as you like, ask anything you like, and we're going to try to be as responsive as we can to that. Beyond this week, though, we're moving, after community forums, and we do this, we go into vision development, and that happens in December. And that'll be a 2-day workshop where David, the owner of our company, comes out, and I'll be with him as well. And we facilitate 2 days of really just digging into this data in more specific terms, asking you where you want to go. And part of our job is to push your thinking, and because the best organizations should always be looking forward and pushing for what's next. Apathy and complacency is how you fall behind very quickly. And so part of our job in this process is to present you with some thoughts and pushes that might make you go initially, but rest assured, ultimately what ends up in that vision is because you put it there. We're not here to push agendas or put our own beliefs in. We'd go start our own school district if we wanted to do that, and none of us are interested in that. So after that, feedback. So again, that's what I talk about. We walk out of that and We have draft narratives of where it is you want your district to go based on all of the information, all of the inputs. And again, part of our role during those 2 days, mine specifically, is to be the representative voices that can't be in that room. So that's why it's important for me to know the data inside and out and really dig into what we're collecting this week, because I have to push on things based on what we're hearing people say. This is what we're hearing your community say. This is what we're hearing your students say. And we need to think about how that gets included in our work moving forward. But again, our recommendation is once you have a draft document, get that to different groups of people to read over, explain through. We're happy to support with process for that, how that's looked with other folks, and get their reaction to it. One way we like to do that is just through asking them what their hopes about it are and what their hesitations are about it. Hopes and hesitations, because that tells you a lot. Tells you a lot. But also, you'll have opportunity, specifically you all as trustees will have opportunity for wordsmithing opportunities and telling us what needs to be adjusted there, and then coming to consensus around it so we can sign off. Once we're signed off, we go into February, which is where we say, okay, this is what your vision says. We need to pull that apart now and say, how are we going to do it? What are the specific actions against everything in that vision? But then also a prioritization process. You can't do it all at once, nor should you try. So it's about working with your team to say, what are the priorities? Some of the data we're collecting from you in conversations through this week will help with that. Some of your data that you get from more standardized measures like MSTEP or your iReady data or anything else you have, even like if you had truancy data or behavioral data, should play a role. So we have qualitative and quantitative data and what your priorities need to be over a 12-month period. And then we go deep into writing those plans out. If we're going to do this, what are the steps to that? Who needs to be involved? What are the measurable impacts that we're going to be able to? And this is a transparency piece. And again, transparency and accountability shouldn't be scary words if you have the structure to do this work. And that's what we're confident we provide. So if we're committed to doing the work as a district and as schools, it should be an open question, not as an I got you, of how are we doing with that work? How do we know we're doing well? Or how do we know we're running into barriers? How are we measuring that? That'll be very important. That's baked into our process. That's baked into our strategic planning document. And we don't see that as I got you, because what I would suggest following that up is what are the barriers and what do you need from us to support you in getting over them or around them or under them or through them? That's the role. That's what we believe. So that'll be very clear in what we do. And then implementation. And the contract you approved actually has some implementation supports built in. It's not an extra cost for the first year, where we help you with structures around quarterly reporting. How does this information come back to the board? What are some structures for that? So you all know what to expect. You all are in a great position to ask good questions without feeling like you have to micromanage every project either, because I doubt any of you have time for that. So it's what are the places where we need to have eyes on, hands on, and where does our governance come into play if there's barriers of things. And then also we have built in your first annual replan. So we do what's called a plan record at the end of a year with your team, where we do a reflection exercise and say, here's what was accomplished, here's what we still need to work on. We go right back to those metrics, SMART goals and impact goals that we set up, and we talk about what needs to happen next. We reprioritize for the coming 12 months, and we go again. So that's all included in our support services, inclusive of, as we've always said, if you have questions throughout this, call us, ask us. We'll jump on a Zoom, whatever it needs to be. So that's the road. As a couple people have already pointed out, Scott, you can't make us do anything. Nobody here said that to me, but we've already heard out in some of our focus. And it's not an attack on us. We don't take that negative. It's more of it's an expression of, this is going to be up to us eventually, isn't it? And the answer is yes. We can provide the structures. We know they work. We know if you do it, you will be successful in getting to the things you want to get to. It will be up to you, but just know we're here to support you throughout. So when you run into barriers, questions, issues, that's when you reach out to us. It's not an extra charge, just putting it out there. That's what we're here for, because we want to see you be successful. And with that, I thank you for your time, and I'll open it up to your questions or comments or praise or whatever.
Anyone have a, Trustee LeCouy?
No, thank you. I really appreciate all the support that you've provided to us thus far in the process. I'm thinking about the vision development piece, and you talked about how you'll help push our thinking, and I wondered if you could give us some examples of what that might look like and how you incorporate what you've learned and push our thinking.
Yeah, so there's a lot where we talk about future of education, and we even will present with a day in the life scenario that has a lot of student agency, for lack of a better term, where students are making some pretty significant decisions about their learning day on a regular basis. And that exercise is not designed to say, this is what you should be doing. It's meant to get you to a place where it's a little bit uncomfortable and imagine what the possibilities are for your district. Another one that's come up very recently, that when we've done this work with some districts just in the last couple months, is what is the role of artificial intelligence in education, and what is the work needs to be done? If you think back, and most of us can probably remember, no matter what your opinion is of social media, and I won't share mine, but I have them, is a lot of districts across the country ignored that conversation until it was too late. We kind of went with, let's pretend it's not there, and let's not have the conversation or talk about policy or appropriate use or even get into the specifics of, should we be teaching our kids how to appropriately use something like social media? And a lot of that, it's not the school's fault. We have to have some of those conversations, and AI is the next one I think we have to have. And there's a lot of great potential, and there's a lot of great unknowns and potential dangers too, right? So from a board perspective, what governance needs to come into play there, and what conversations need to happen before we develop policy? From a student perspective, what advantages could there be and what fears could there be from an educator perspective? So that's a couple of examples. Some of it will be based on some of the things we hear this week, if I'm honest, and saying, okay, these are hot button issues. Have you considered? And we'll try to take you way out here and way out here and see what your reaction is to it. And ultimately, though, it's putting you in positions to have conversations during those 2 days that are deep, authentic, very contextual to your district, but also maybe a little bit uncomfortable. Good question.
Trustee Blake?
First of all, thank you for the presentation. I found it to be very interesting, and the pie charts I liked, so I'm with Barb on that.
I'm not married to the pie charts, so I take no offense.
Because you can compare to. That was
Yeah,
what was
sure.
helpful. So to me, the information that I read in here is kind of like a Rorschach test, really. There's so much information, and if you want to make an argument that everything in our district is wonderful, there's so much there that would support that argument. And if you want to make the argument that things are really terrible and we have all these problems, there are answers that could be used for that. What I'm trying to figure out is how to contextualize this. I saw things in here I really liked about employees being valued and feel they're doing important work. Students like school, they felt safe, But then there were negatives. There were concerns too. How can we make sure that we're following the data versus? Well, let me finish the question.
Yeah.
I saw some stuff in here that supports my prior thoughts, and I think we all want to be careful we're not just following our priors, but we're following the data. What can you do or suggest or mold us so that we're following the data, not following our own, using the data to support our prior beliefs?
Well, I think, and it's a fair question. And one thing I'd push back on before I get to my answer is the terrible things, because I just I know what you mean, so, but I want to contextualize that in public to say, I wouldn't frame that as terrible. I would frame it as we have things to work on. And I think if you look at districts across the country, if somebody claims they don't have something to work on, that's who you need to worry about. We put it in we're big believers in coaching. And we don't view coaching as a remedial exercise. It's not a good use of time or resources. Coaching is really what the best people do to stay the best and fine tune their practice. So I just frame that as look at that more as I didn't read any of it as terrible. There are hot button issues, but your point is taken. So what I would suggest to answer your question is, one, we put the statement in there. It was on a slide today, and it's in the executive summary section of the report, which is keep coming back to this is one piece that had a specific purpose. And I don't recommend that you use any of this data to say, there it is, it's conclusive, and we need to make decisions. I don't care what direction you're trying to go. I think we're at the beginning stages. I live in Colorado, and as a former teacher, we used to take kids on hikes sometimes, and we are in the first few steps of summiting a mountain with a bunch of fifth graders, something I've actually done. And they start negotiating and making assumptions about what the rest of the journey is going to be inside of the first 100 yards. And they start negotiating out, I will stay right here if you just let me not continue, and I'll be here, I promise. And I can't do that, so you have to push them forward and understand that every phase brings value and every phase brings a new realization. And so you are in the first 100 yards of summiting a mountain, and that's what this data represents. So I would strongly suggest this not be used as or framed as anything definitive, because it was never meant to be. To some of your points about participation, I think all the way through this, there are probably swaths of people out there that didn't feel they had the opportunity, missed the opportunity, whatever it was. That's fair. I'm not here to say, well, that's your problem. That's not what that is. It's just an indicator of we have some data to ask deeper questions about. So don't make decisions about it. I would ask that you don't make assumptions and say, here's the evidence for this or for this about it. It is what it is. It was designed to get us some high-level themes so we can ask tougher questions face-to-face with people and collect that data. Does that help answer? Okay. You can push me on it. I'm happy for it. As somebody pointed out, I can't make you do anything.
Okay, having said that, now I'm going to ask you a data question.
Okay.
In the information that you provided to us, the information was presented as all parents, all students, all staff members. Did you break it out at all to look at if there were differences between parents who had elementary students, staff that's in the elementary building versus secondary? And were there any differences between those that would be nice to see separately, or did you look at them and they should all be lumped together because they were the same?
So we intentionally did not track grade levels. So no, we didn't break it out by I have a primary student versus middle years or high school student. We do get that coming out in focus groups quite a bit because people identify and say, look, without even asking, they tell us who their students are, they tell us where their students are, and they tell us how many they've had graduated and different levels of perceived success that they've had. So we will have more information about that coming. The only place we saw a statistical difference is that difference with employees, with children, and then our parents and caregivers that weren't employees. And that the main ones came around some of those unsure answers. Most of the unsure answers came from non-employees. When we get to your community level, most of the unsure answers came from community members without students currently in your district. Those were the only statistical differences we saw in that.
Are you okay? Trustee.
Thank you. talk to me about the 2 days in December where we developed the vision. And what I mean is like logistic. Talk to me about the agenda. What does it look like? Who's in the room? That type of thing.
Yeah, okay, yeah, great. So it's 2 full days. So yeah, 2 full days, and David Gregory and myself facilitate that, and we ask for representative stakeholders. And with that representative stakeholders, our suggestion is about 20 people, and we can play with that. And there's rationale behind that. Because when you put too many people in a room, although they all have great perspective, it becomes a mess to actually get anything done. Again, I share often that a camel is a racehorse designed by committee. There can be too many people in the room, right? You never, or if you're a Simpsons fan, if you watch an episode where Homer gets to design his own car with the automaker, it's a mess. It's well-intentioned, but you don't get there. We have specifically called out the need for trustee representation in those 2 days. We recognize there can only be a certain number before calling it a meeting, and so we would recommend going to that limit and getting some trustee participation in that, because we think it's an important perspective. We've asked for building leadership perspective in that, and then we've recommended that executive cabinet be there, because ultimately when you put a strategic plan into play, if we want to talk about responsibility and accountability, ultimately those are typically the people, whether they delegate the work out or not, which is great if they do, they're going to be the ones standing in front of you reporting it out, so we feel they need to be in the room to do that. Again, we'll be representing the voices that can't be in the room, that have heard. We're open to other suggestions, but that give or take 20 number is what we found to be most effective in this work. Yep.
Trustee LeCouey?
I'm wondering, how do our results compare to some of your other clients? Are there areas where we're outliers?
It's always a difficult question, and it gets asked a lot because the questions are personalized. It's hard to do an apples to apples comparison. I would say the struggles with work-life harmony that's an outlier. That's certainly an issue across the country, but it seems to be more of a hot button issue here currently. One of the things that made it into the survey, and I think it's an important perspective, that we don't have any comparative work on. Most people don't ask the question why don't you send your kids to our schools, and what could bring you back? So I don't have a lot of comparative data for you. I could go back and look and see. I haven't dug through, and I certainly don't have memorized the survey results of some of our other clients. But again, if there's certain ones you're curious about, I'm happy to take a look and see if we can find some comparative data. But again, questions are so personalized and written for you that I wouldn't anticipate a lot of apples to apples comparisons there.
Trustee Ennis?
Thank you for this presentation. You had talked about the need for consistent engagement, especially after we get through this process. Can you speak to, in your experience going through this process with other districts, comparable sizes, what that could look like?
Sure, and it's done in multiple phases usually. So one is initial rollout. So when you actually have a vision that's agreed upon, it's going out and doing things like, whether you have these structures or not, it's doing coffees with the community. It's going out.
Like a roadshow?
Yeah, it absolutely is taking the vision on the road, giving people an opportunity to read it, ask questions about it. There might be language in it that's more education specific, that instead of running away from terms, maybe go deeper into this is what this means and this is what you can expect from us. Mm-hmm. So to help build that understanding with a wide variety of your community members and stakeholders, inclusive of students. so they know this is what we're committing to as a district. Here's what you can expect of us. Once implementation is once you've got that in place, we feel it's a good habit to be in anyway. And a little bit of the shift comes in as you have strategic priorities in your strategic plan. Start getting people into the places where it's being implemented. Share the incremental progress. So,
Like on a quarterly basis or?
quarterly, monthly. I think more often than monthly becomes a not great exercise. Monthly's kind of I think quarterly's the most common, and that works very well. It depends on what sort of interactions we're talking about. I'll give you an example. One district we work with, through their strategic planning work and the desire for transparency and celebrating incremental progress, organizes school tours where different members of the community come out, get in buildings where this stuff is actually happening. And those might be parents, and they do different tours for different groups. It might be parents. It might be, let's invite our local organizations, inclusive of local universities, in to our schools. So we can say, here's the vision. Same opportunity to engage with it. Here's a strategic priority we have, and the through line to the exact place in the vision that comes from. Now let us, and what our intended outcome is, what our impact is. Again, some of the successes we've had, some of the challenges, but don't take our word for it. Seeing is believing. Now let's go out into some classrooms and see where this is actually taking hold. Let's show you not perfect, but promising practice that's happening in there. That in itself brings we talk a lot about windows into the classroom. And one of the things that I think since the pandemic, understandably so, that it's been difficult to do for most districts is re-engage our community in understanding what the day-to-day actually looks like. So there's a lot of assumptions that can come from that. And look, there is a climate in a lot of people making assumptions, and things feed into that. Oh, this must be happening because I heard about it happening. I'm not saying it is or isn't, but let's give people windows in often enough to where we're empowering them to have community conversations, ball field conversations, birthday conversations, those sorts of things are some of the best word of mouth you can have as a district to say, you know what, I hear what you're saying, but I've been in our schools, or no, this is what I've actually witnessed and seen. So developing those opportunities and structures to help people do those well, and not in a dog and pony show way. One thing I really appreciated about the elementaries I visited today is I don't feel like I got a dog and pony show, because I asked them not to give me one. I wanted to just come in. And I walked into classrooms, and most of them didn't stop what they were doing. They ignored me. Perfect. Because they were doing what they do. And that helps me get a flavor for what you're doing. It also shows a level of confidence in your educators. We need to do that more often with a wide variety of community members to help with communication there. Again, I can go into very micro specifics how you do all these things, but take it on tour, get windows into the classroom, whether that's in person, through your own social media, through your newsletters. I mean, I'm not indicating that that's not already happening, but that intentional connection to the vision and your strategic priorities. So it becomes old language for people. Oh, we're talking about this again. Yeah, we are, because it's our priority. And this is what we've committed to doing over the next 12 months. We're going to keep talking about it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Trustee Weaver?
So Scott, first off, again, I want to say thank you for your time. I know you and I have had a lot of conversations. You've responded to emails very promptly. So again, I really appreciate that. I do want to just touch on one thing. I know the thing to say at these meetings is about the students, and we need to engage the students. And absolutely, we need to engage our students, having our students have input in this process. Mm-hmm. But I think as we go through this and we get to the data and trust the process so we don't undermine it, we got to make sure that we are actually weighting the stakeholders properly. And there are two stakeholder populations that without them, the schools don't function, and that's parents and teachers. If parents don't enroll their kids, which we are seeing a decline in enrollment, then again, that's a funding part. If teachers don't show up to teach the students, we don't have a school. So I think as we go through, we need to weight them properly. yes, absolutely, we can hear from our students. Absolutely, students can have input, but it needs to be weighted properly.
Sure.
Because again, at the end of the day, they still are students. They still are kids. And again, any of us that are parents probably can understand at times when you ask your kids questions and understand they are still kids. And yes, engage them in the process. But as we go through this, I hope we do get to the part where we actually can get past just saying certain things, because again, it's the nice thing to say or the thing we want people to hear, but we get to the facts of it of we have to make sure that we are reestablishing trust with our parents in the system so that, one, our enrollment stops declining and hopefully we can start getting students back, and that we actually do create an environment for our teachers that they want to teach in. So that to say, one, you said to have that population be a smaller feedback is concerning, because again, we want our teachers to give feedback. But also, I would want to see that granular part of it when we talk about work-life balance, is we all can, again, in working in manufacturing, we talk about that a lot. At the same time, okay, then what are the factors? Because again, we are about to go into contract negotiations. So how do we leverage that part of it?
Sure.
So what does that mean? But that's where we need to get to that actual granular part of the data.
Yeah.
To say, okay, is this, what pieces do we have control over? What pieces do we not have control over? What can we compromise? But again, as I hope we do run this process, we do hopefully move away from a little bit some of the things that we think people want to hear or say the things that are nice to hear, and we make sure we do weight properly that, again, there are two stakeholders that without them, the school system does not exist. So again, parents and teachers have to be the focus.
Yeah, so fair enough. And one thing I'll put back to you there is anything as far as, so I think you're right with student, like as far as context matters, and they're students. And I think we need to be careful about dismissing their own context and saying, well, they're just kids, or that's how school's supposed to be. And I'm not suggesting you're saying that for a minute. But I think it is something we need to be careful about, because you want to get a group of students riled up, tell them they're just kids. And don't be in a locked room when you tell them that. Yeah, so when you talk about waiting and making those decisions about what our true priorities are, and taking all of those perspectives and making a decision about what do we need to prioritize, I call that leadership. And that's why we're asking for a representative sample of leadership of this district to be in those visioning sessions as well as your strategic planning sessions, because ultimately that's the job of leadership, isn't it? To set the priorities, plant the flags where they need to be planted, and say, this is the work we're going to do, and here's how you can hold us accountable to that work, all inclusive, right? So that would be my response. So I take on board what you're saying. I don't disagree with it. I just wanted to provide that context. That is coming, and ultimately that'll be up to you all.
Anyone else have any questions or comments at this time? I would just say that I appreciate your time prior to this meeting, answering everyone's questions, getting organized, and how thorough you have been. And I'm looking forward to hearing back on these focus groups and what you identify through those as well,
Great.
and the next steps of this process. So
It was a fun day, so I'm looking forward to the rest of the week. I appreciate all of your work and your commitment to the process and your curiosity and your questions. So again, keep them coming. We think that's a healthy part of this process and a true indicator of a healthy organization. So thank you.
thank you. All right, so we are moving on to agenda item 5.2. This is the complaint process. I recently received a complaint that identified the board's 4 officers. Our current process identifies that if the president is named, that the vice president would handle processing of the complaint. We do not have any provisions if both the president and vice president are named in the same complaint. Miller Johnson is currently reviewing our policies and handbooks, so I'm not looking to make significant changes at this time. I'm looking to address this current issue until we receive feedback from legal counsel on whether they would recommend any updates to the process. I would recommend that in this instance, we delegate authority to legal counsel to review the complaint, determine whether it meets the standard for investigation, and proceed accordingly, either by conducting the investigation or notifying the complainant and the board that no investigation will occur. I'm hoping that we can reach a consensus on this, as we don't normally vote on items at a work session, but I didn't want this to linger until our next regular board meeting on November 27th. So I'm asking our board colleagues, any thoughts you have on this? Trustee Weaver?
So when this process was first started, it was pointed out how flawed it was. And so here we sit again with it being completely flawed. No, I do not support in any way pushing this towards any kind of legal counsel. Submit it to the board members not represented. Let us look at it and make a decision. It's simple as that. I mean, there's no reason to involve lawyers. And again, a process has been completely shown to be an absolute joke, waste of time. So again, to spend more money on legal counsel for this would be, again, just a complete waste. Send the complaint to the trustees not listed. I think there's 3 of us. It's an odd number, so that means, right. So let us make a decision on it, and we'll move forward.
Trustee Blake?
So I wasn't around when this process was put into place. So I was reading it today, really kind of for the first time. It doesn't really directly address a situation like what we're talking about right now. One way to look at it is that this could be seen as 4 complaints. It's a complaint against each of the 4 people. And so the president makes decisions on the other 3, and the vice president makes decisions on the complaint against the president. Some people may not like that, but that's an alternative approach, an alternative way to look at it. I am concerned about the fact that somebody can do this, make a complaint, and I'm not making any decisions on what I think about the complaint, but any complaint against the 4 officers, and then just by virtue of having made the complaint, knock all of those people out, and then leave the 3 of us over here to make decisions as what is just a gatekeeper role. This is just the point where you're deciding whether it even reaches the level to get reviewed by legal counsel. And I think if the 3 of us voted on something like that to censure the 4 of you, you know what the outcome is going to be. So I would send it to legal counsel.
Trustee LeCouey?
I'm actually really annoyed with how much time we've spent on this complaint process. I've expressed this before. I think that the way that we use our lawyers can be very wasteful at times. And when you look at what kinds of consequences come out of this complaint process, it's basically just a censure. It's just saying, oh, the board disagrees and thinks that you did the wrong thing. So I think the consequences are fairly meaningless anyways. I certainly don't want to spend money having lawyers investigate this. That benefits the lawyers, it doesn't benefit the district. I would suggest that we just, as a 7-person board, I wouldn't even ask you to recuse yourself. I would just say that the board should just make the decision about whether or not we pursue this complaint, and you can vote yes or no, and then we can just be done with it, and we can move on to other issues that actually matter for the district, educational issues, issues about how operational issues about policy, the stuff that actually affects our students and teachers and parents, and we can stop wasting time on a meaningless consequence for board members, because really, the only meaningful consequence is if you petition the governor to remove a board member, but that doesn't happen unless the grievance is extremely severe. The censure, it's just a reprimand. So frankly, I think we should just decide this as a board and be done with it.
Trustee Ennis?
So, President Butel, I guess I'd ask that you question my colleague, should we be getting rid of the complaint process altogether? I would be open to that.
You may answer that, Trustee LeCouey.
I can answer that. I sent you all an email earlier today with my revisions to the complaint process, which basically does what I'm suggesting right now. Instead of putting the process in the hands of the board president and coming up with this whole issue, oh, what do we do if she's named in the complaint, then the vice president, what they're both named, whatever, change it to the full board. And the full board can just make the decision. And in my revision, I said, I was just thinking through the logistics of it. Okay, someone submits a complaint. Within 30 days, the board acknowledges the complaint and votes on whether we should pursue it or not. And the board votes on whether we need to engage legal counsel or not. And that would be an easy way to just address this and be done with it once and for all.
Trustee Gupta?
So one of the issues that I see with that proposal Trustee Lakui sent us is that means any complaint that would be filed against anyone on this board would get aired publicly in a public meeting. And I don't think that is necessary. I mean, that could, that tool could be weaponized, and until that grievance that's filed or complaint that's filed is vetted to the established level of kind of validity that we had established in the original process of having likelihood to result in some sort of discipline, I think that should not be made public, because people could say anything about anyone, and once you make that statement in a public meeting, it lives on in some ways. That's why we had this discussion and this debate at the time when we adopted this process in the first place, and that was the reason we put in a gatekeeper with the board president, who's a person who's elected by the majority of this board and entrusted to lead this board, to contact legal counsel on behalf of the board in this kind of situation. So I still, for that reason, I still think we need a gatekeeper there. And while I agree in this circumstance it should not be the board president, I would agree with sending it to legal counsel for their review.
Trustee,
Was she asking a question of me about this, or?
I was making a statement.
Okay.
Trustee Annis?
Yeah. Madam President, I would like to make a motion that we send the complaint to the legal counsel and they determine whether it meets the criteria to move forward to an investigation.
I guess we don't normally vote on items at our work session.
Well, not at least when the cameras are on.
So if the board would like to go outside of the standards, we can, vote to make that an option. I was just hoping to reach a consensus on this one item in order to be able to move forward. If we want to wait till November 27th, we could vote at that time if that's what we want to do.
Well, if you're looking for an informal consensus, then
Madam
I would
President?
also agree with Trustee
Madam President?
Blake,
Just one second.
and I would
She hasn't
agree
been acknowledged.
to send it to
Point of
the
order,
attorney.
Madam President.
Trustee Lakui?
I was going to ask to respond to what Trustee Gupta was saying. And we wouldn't have to read the full complaint necessarily in order to acknowledge it at a board meeting and then vote whether or not we should pursue it. So we don't have to necessarily air it, word for word as it was submitted to us. There's a way to do that without, running into the same kinds of concerns that she has. But, the point that I made back then too, when we were discussing this, is that we're publicly elected officials and we're representatives of the community. And none of us should be concerned about if communities have their grievances against us and they bring forward those concerns, we can take it in a public setting, just like we've all endured, letters written about us in the board meeting packets, or we've endured things said at the microphone if people don't like what's going on. People are free to say whatever they'd like to say about board members, and none of us should be afraid of that. We should be ready to just deal with it and be done with it, and not have to outsource it to lawyers in order to hide from it.
I'm sorry, Trustee Gupta?
Yeah, I think the fact of the matter is you could air it publicly, right? There's not a rule against it. So your point that maybe we wouldn't have to, read the whole complaint out loud doesn't prohibit that from happening. So someone could do that. And false allegations that are very damaging in nature occur on a regular basis. And I find it a little bit ironic that the same person who really made a big deal publicly about hearing some harsh feedback from board colleagues is now saying, oh, just take it on the chin, you're a public elected official. So I think we have a duty to protect both ourselves, our board, our district, and our community from allegations that don't have any merit or based in any fact. And that's why the gatekeeper role is there.
Trustee Weaver?
So the process that was adopted was giving the power to make the decision to the board president to whether they wanted to refer it on, and they could seek counsel. Elected officials, we are the decision makers. We are the finders of fact. So again, the idea that you keep outsourcing stuff to lawyers that are non-elected officials is not part of the process. The decision is supposed to be being made by the president, which again was explained in the adoption of the process is bad to put that power into one person's subjective opinion. Our lack of policy is the problem because again, we're not basing it on a policy to say whether that should be or shouldn't be done. We have to go out and seek lawyers. And that's why, again, in the most recent one filed against me, which I would absolutely say is a baseless claim, Thurn Law Firm was engaged to offer an opinion. I will not say what their opinion was. I'll just state, had President Butel, had you listened to what I said to you in December, it would have saved the district money. That these subjective bylaws aren't very good and don't lead to likely outcomes when you try to hold people accountable to them. So we're going to continue to go down this road of we don't have good policies and people are afraid that stuff will be made transparent to the community. If someone files a complaint that is baseless against you, what would be the harm to have it heard at an open meeting, have the finders of fact, which are our elected officials, rule, what does the policy say? Did you violate it? No. So if people are truly filing baseless and false attacks, they will be the ones that get exposed to the process. That's actually why transparency works. It exposes bad actors. So the idea that somehow a gatekeeper was put in place to protect us, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. The gatekeeper was put in place because no one on this board wants to make a decision, and even the gatekeeper themselves is not making the decision. They're letting lawyers make the decision. So again, the whole process is a sham. It cost our district money, and it's really everyone at this table not accepting their own responsibility as an elected official to be the finder of fact. If you can't look at a claim and look at our policy and say, is it violated, is it not, yes or no, then that really questions what you're doing on this board.
Trustee Gupta?
We still are the finders of fact. The fact that we send it to legal for them to review based on their legal expertise and objectivity so that no one on this board is looking at information that could be deemed later to be, subjectively decided on and have more credibility with the outcome because it's not someone on the board making the decision. They bring their recommendations, their findings to us. Ultimately, we do decide. We either decide to adopt those findings or not. So the power is still in our hands. We are just enlisting the help of professionals who are outside of this board to help deliberate in a more credible way.
Trustee Blake?
So the policy has already been adopted. This is our policy, whether we like it or now we see that there, and this often happens in laws. You pass something and then later on you see that, oh, there's some holes here that we didn't realize, that we didn't know somebody was going to try to file a complaint against all the officers of the board all at once. I mean, that's not something that most people would expect. But just to make sure people understand what the policy is that was adopted, if somebody makes a complaint, the board somebody, and we have chosen the board president, is the gatekeeper to decide if this complaint is just minimally, could it result in some disciplinary action. They're not deciding whether it is or is not valid or whether it's true or any of those things, but just do the allegations reach the level to where somebody could reach disciplinary action. Once that happens, it goes to the lawyer. The lawyer does all the investigation. The lawyer does the report. The report comes back, and then that's our record. And we're acting almost like, and then we're the finder of fact. We say, based on this record and this investigation, what do we vote? Do we vote that it's been substantiated or it's not been substantiated? There is nothing in this policy that allows for any of these alternatives, that allows for the three of us just to vote, that allows for 7 people to vote, even people. There's a specific spot that says a person, I think, that we expect that they will recuse themselves. So that's not in meeting with that expectation. The only thing that's close to what it says in here is giving it to the lawyer, because at least that's a part of the process. That's step 2. We don't have our gatekeeper, but it's at least in the process. The other ones, there's nothing in here to support.
Brief statement. So again, the process was bad from the beginning. We can show that it was complete. All what you raised was all pointed out when it was originally adopted. It was a rush. We have a complaint hearing that was a complete waste of time and effort. And no, the board has shown that it's not finder of fact. It's just adopting what the facts are presented by the lawyers. So again, the majority, you're going to do what you want to do. If you want to keep wasting money, keep wasting money. But again, this is completely shown that, again, the board is just completely out of touch with any common sense at this point. Just so, again, keep wasting money.
Trustee Lakouи.
It looks like we're going to hire lawyers to determine whether or not the full board is going to censure some of the board members. That's it. Remember, a censure is just a reprimand. We're hiring lawyers to see if the board needs to reprimand some members.
Trustee Gupta.
I see it differently. I see it as we're hiring lawyers to evaluate an allegation made by a community member that 4 trustees violated a board policy, and to investigate that and see if that's true or not, and bring those findings to the board to either adopt or not adopt, and then, as another step, decide what, if or what to do with that. And while it may not mean much to some others to be censured in a board position, that certainly does mean something to me.
So I see, 5 people who are leaning towards the forwarding it to attorney to decide, 2 that are not. Do we wish to hold off until 11:27 to vote on this officially, since we could not reach a full consensus? Trustee Blake?
If it were up to me, I would be fine voting on this. I'm not trying to shirk my responsibility. I'm just trying to follow the written policy. We have somebody sitting next to me that talks all day long. Policy, 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 policy. We have a policy, guess what? So we need to follow it.
So Trustee Blake?
Appointee
Trustee
Blake, Appointee Blake, I just want to point out, you're actually not following it. You're saying you just want to change it in the way you want. Oh, so it's the closest we can. So again, it doesn't say that. So again, you're right. It doesn't say that because the policy is bad, which has been the point all along. So you just want to adopt it the way that makes sense to you. End of the day, the majority of the board's going to do what it wants and waste the money. End of the day, to be very frank, I'm pretty sure the complaint's subjective. I would not vote against it because I think it's ridiculous that we try to enforce these subjective policies. So if you're concerned about that part of it, I probably do not think this would merit actual discipline. So again, just keep wasting money.
Trustee Gupta.
Madam President, I move that we make an exception to our rule about voting at a work session and move forward with voting to empower you to take this forward to council.
Okay, so I think we should have 2 votes on that. So your motion to make an exception to vote during a work session, is that
Yep.
correct?
Yes, thank you.
Is there support for that?
I support.
Supported by Trustee Annis. Is there any additional discussion? Trustee Lakoui?
I'm going to vote yes on this motion because I don't want to waste any more time than necessary on this ridiculous complaint process. I think the way we're going about it is wrong. Our complaint process doesn't actually cover this situation, so it would require revision anyways. But I see where the majority of the board is going, and I understand it's going to end up there. So I'm going to vote yes, so that hopefully we can talk about new things on November 27th, and specifically about how can we better focus our resources so that they're helping our students and teachers in the district in the ways that money ought to be spent.
Anyone else? All right, so we have a motion to make an exception to vote during a work session. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? That's a 6-1 vote. So Trustee Gupta, did you have then the follow-up motion?
I think Trustee Annis is going to do that.
Trustee Annis?
Madam President, I move that we send the complaint to legal counsel and they can determine whether it meets the criteria to move forward to an investigation.
Trustee, would you mind if that was revised to say, give me just one second. that we delegate authority to legal counsel to review the complaint, determine whether it meets the standards for investigation, and proceed accordingly, either by conducting the investigation or notifying the complainant and the board that no investigation will occur.
So moved.
Is there support for that? Trustee Gupta. Discussion at this point? Trustee Lakouи.
I will be voting no on this motion because I don't support directing our money towards lawyers to make this decision about whether or not the board should reprimand board members.
Anyone else? Trustee Alsbach.
Point of clarification, just a question. Is this amendment to amend the process, or is this to handle this particular situation?
This is for this specific, complaint.
Okay.
Any changes to the process, which I feel there are some that are warranted, but I think that those should be reviewed after we hear from Miller Johnson's review on that.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Just want to make a
Trustee
point for the
Weaver.
community. So just so everyone knows, the company that we paid to come up with this terrible process is the company that's also helping us revise our policies and processes, which is who that we're going to refer this to be reviewed by. So the only one that's making any money here are district lawyers. And again, it is just an absolute waste. You hear a complaint, elected officials should be able to hear the complaint, look at a policy and state, does it meet that standard, does it not, and make a decision. I am just blown away that elected officials can't figure that out. So again, the only people getting money and benefiting from this process is Miller Johnson.
Trustee Alsbach.
I think it's important that we, as board members, don't take arbitrary and capricious decisions against each other. I do think it's important to have a gatekeeper and have a legal opinion if this is valid or not. And, you know, if you're really concerned about wasting money with lawyers, maybe some of the board members shouldn't sue the district.
Madam President,
Okay,
Madam President, no, I got a brief statement on that. This is such a tired narrative. We would not be being sued for a FOIA violation if we had a proper
Trustee
FOIA
Weaver, let's
policy.
please stick to
we do
our
not have a proper
point of
FOIA
order.
policy, which is why
Point
we are
of
being
order.
sued for a FOIA violation.
Trustee Weaver. So for both, please remember our norms to be respectful, as well as Trustee Weaver to keep
Point
to
of
the
order,
subject.
Madam President, you're interrupting, and he's explaining, you know, the other side of this. You
That-
know,
that what he's
so
explaining
it's
has
not
nothing to
right
do with-
It's not right to keep, it's germane to what was just said.
But I was in the midst of telling her that it was not appropriate.
Were
So
you going
anyway,
to correct
is
the
there-
false statement that was made?
I apologize.
Anyway, is there any other comments on this motion? All right, then all of those in favor of delegating authority to legal counsel to review the complaint, determine whether it meets the standards for investigation, and proceed accordingly, either by conducting the investigation or notifying the complainant and the board that no investigation will occur, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
That's a 5-2 vote that does pass, and we will forward it to legal counsel. All right, we are moving on to agenda item 6.0, which is public comment. I do not have any yellow cards at this time. Was there anyone who wished to make comment? If you can get your card, we'll wait for you. Where are they? They're right by the entrance.
Joshua Raymond, parent. You guys had trustees who were willing to say, we're ready to dismiss this. Let's go ahead and dismiss it and not spend any money on a lawyer. You could have taken a vote on that and be done with it and had 2 minutes of discussion at tops. Please focus on education. This is ridiculous that we're spending so much time on all this petty fighting on the board, quit it. Get to education, because I'm frankly, I'm done with almost all of you, because we're wasting my kids' time on things that they can't get these days of school back because you guys decide that you want to hit each other over the head instead of getting on to education. So, why don't you just take a vote to dismiss this whole complaint, because apparently you can add votes whenever you want. So add a motion right now to dismiss this complaint and be done with it. Thank you.
We're moving on to agenda item 7.0, additional comments. 7.1 is members of the Board of Education. Individual board members may use this time to share information about school visits, updates from committees or organizations they are assigned to, or express their personal opinion. Do any members of the board have additional comments? Trustee Blake?
So the last couple weeks, I have been getting around a lot in the district and finally getting to different schools and seeing some things. And I wanted to kind of focus us back on the schools and the learning and the things that I've seen. I did spend some time at Baldwin Elementary, first of all, with Principal Mirando. And he took me around and showed me all kinds of interesting things. And I went in different classrooms, and the kids were really engaged. It was really nice to see. I also spent time at Van Hoosen Middle School. That was a particularly fun time for me because I was asked to come and be a member of a jury, and the children were making presentations, and I got to judge 5 rounds of it, and it was just right up my alley. I loved it, and I was really impressed with the 8th grade. These were 8th graders, and Mrs. Fragomeni was also there, so she knows how good they did. There was one time when we almost couldn't give a decision because it was so equally balanced. And so the whole tour at Van Hoosen was really, really great. And that's our school where we're going to be one day, so that was especially good for me to see. I did see a couple of Veterans Day events. First of all, we went to the Delta Kelly Veterans Day event. They did a parade. They had singing, the kids and so forth. They got to march with real veterans, and then they also got to take pictures of veterans and their family, and so that was a special thing. And then I got to go to Brewster, which did it a different way. They had a presentation in their school. They had veterans come on stage, and there was a Q&A with the kids, and they got to ask them questions. And I was really, really glad to see. I think every building did something for Veterans Day, and that was also right up my alley. I come from a military family. My sister and her husband are career military people, so I've been around military a lot, and I love how much we lifted them up and how much we saluted them. I hope in the district, and I trust we do, that we make that option as a career available to kids and that we promote it and we tell them all the opportunities that they can have serving their country in the military. So those school visits really made me feel good about the district. You hear all this noise, and then you go in the schools and you go in classrooms and you see kids learning, and it helps you feel better about the district. So that was my comment.
Trustee Weaver?
So again, tonight we see a lot of conversation about the absence of policy. We're in the news again in a federal lawsuit. At some point, it's sad that it takes these type of events, but I'm hoping the majority of our board finally sees that it's time to put their politics aside and get to the work of our board's responsibility, which again, we have 3: to hire and oversee a superintendent, policy for the district, and budget. Financial responsibility. That is our 3 responsibilities. Again, we are so absent of policy. Parents ask for them, trustees ask for them, they do not exist. And again, we're paying Miller Johnson, we don't know how much, because I've asked, hey, what is the scope of work? What's their time frame in which they're supposed to get the policies done? Nobody can answer any of those questions. We don't even know what they're working on because they're a law firm, so they do it all behind closed session, where if we were using a company like Neola, it would have to be done in open session, where they're actually a policy company, which have some of the very best ones out there that are really detailed. But again, the board president has chosen to do it all behind the scenes with Miller Johnson, whose work has been shown to be bad at best. And again, their efforts are to make sure they continue to have a source of revenue. So again, hopefully with what was in the news recently and the facts will come out and we'll take care of it and handle it, that the majority of our board realizes we need to stop being reactive and stop waiting for something bad to happen to tell us to do our job. Writing policy for the district is our responsibility. And it's absolutely something that should be being done by the board, not by Miller Johnson in a back room.
Trustee LeCouey?
I wasn't originally going to say anything tonight, but now I'm going to say something. Next year, we have 5 seats open on the board, and our community really needs to decide what they want out of their publicly elected officials. We have a lot of trustees on our board, and they talk about going to the schools and going to these events and getting to see students in their elements shining and learning and growing, and all of that is wonderful. I love those things too. And it's fun, really, to dwell in the positivity sometimes and to just enjoy that, because those things are absolutely happening. What we saw in the strategic plan when it said that there's acknowledgement of our successes and potential, that's true. And I think people who feel very differently about some of the stuff going on in our schools can all agree about a lot of that, and we enjoy that part. But one thing that you need to remember is that we're a governance board, and our job is to provide oversight and to make sure that things are running properly. You know, there's this readiness to move forward, and the question is, how do we do that? How do we move forward? Because I think all of us can also agree that we want to move forward. But in order to move forward, you have to be willing to not only celebrate all of the good things that are going on in the district, but also acknowledge the problems and the shortcomings that exist so that we can remediate some of the problems that linger from the past, prevent similar problems from happening in the future, and set our community's mind at ease. Negativity is uncomfortable, and I don't like sitting in it either, but you know, when wrongdoing has occurred, who's at fault? The one who commits the wrongdoing or the one who reveals the wrongdoing? And the truth is, it really depends on the facts of the case. You know, if we have policies that are failing and hurting our kids and we're not doing anything about it, that's an unsolved problem. If we have no consequences for administrators who retaliate against parents or employees of the district and they're still employed and who knows what's going on, problem's not fixed. If we've had public funds used for unapproved purposes, or if we've had public funds spent without proper documentation, and we neglect to enforce the protocols that we have in place, or we neglect to acknowledge the waste, then we've still got a problem. If we continue to use a literacy curriculum that's been debunked by a failed author, what are we doing? We've still got a problem. So we have a lot of real serious issues that need to be addressed. We shouldn't be wasting our time with petty grievances against each other. We need to be focused on the issues that really matter to our kids and to the district, and we need to do better. We need to remember it's Rochester Community Schools. This is the community's school district, and we've got to do better for the community, better for the parents, better for the teachers, better for our kids.
Trustee Alspach?
So this last weekend, I attended the Michigan School Board Association Leadership Conference with Trustee Butel and Trustee Annis. It was very informative. We learned a lot about different roles of a school board. The legislation updates that are coming were very informative. And it was great to talk to other school boards across the state and see the things, their struggles and some of their possible solutions. Before that, I also attended the CTE advisory meeting here in the district. And this is a meeting where our CTE teachers have industry come in, and they present to industry. These are the things we're doing within our career clusters to get our kids to have industry certifications, not just grades, but something they can use for a career after college. And then they also ask the industry partners, okay, where are we doing? What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? You know, what certifications are you looking for? There was a book that they published that had all the clusters and what they're doing at every school. And I heard one of the counselors say, I need more copies of this so I can show it to the kids to show them what their options are and so I can show it to the parents. And I did bring back a copy of that for all of us that I gave to you guys at the last board meeting. So I think it was wonderful to see our teachers showing off the work that they've done in CTE. We saw in the survey that's a big unsure area, and I think that is something we need to communicate more often, and there's really good work being done in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Gupta?
So this past weekend, I had the honor of spending Friday and Saturday at Rochester High School with about 500 really excited middle school robotics students who competed in a middle school robotics competition co-hosted by the 3 high school robotics teams, the Atombots, the Feds 201, which I am a coach on in full disclosure, and the Stony Creek Cybercats host this event every year, and we had many students from our district participating. All of the middle schools had teams there. There were 7 middle school teams from RCS, 2 from Ruther, 1 from Hart, 3 from West, and 1 from Van Hoosen. And congratulations to Ruther's Robot Crusaders, who made it to the semifinals. And many thanks to the about 200 volunteers who year to year make this event possible and come in for a very long, grueling day where sometimes the technology doesn't work well with you, and still stuck it out to the bitter end until we had everything loaded back up on the trailer and ready to go back to First in Michigan. So congratulations to all the mentors, all the kiddos who participated, and I hope they had a really fun day. Look forward to doing it again next year.
Thank you. Trustee Ennis?
Yes, thank you. This past Sunday, I had the opportunity to have a Zoom meeting with University Hills Brownie Troop 77588 and share about what board service is about and to answer their questions. And it was a really fun interview, and I appreciated the opportunity to speak with those brownies, especially as a former brownie myself. As Trustee Alsbach had mentioned, myself and she and President Butel had the opportunity to go to the Michigan Association of School Boards Annual Leadership Conference. And what I really appreciate about that conference is that it's a bucket filler, because you get an opportunity to be around other school board trustees from all over the state. You get to share information about their best practices, about the issues that they're having. And every day is a school day if you let it be. And so using the opportunity to go to these annual leadership conferences that the MASB does offer gives us an opportunity to grow and learn in this role as school district governance officials. I happened to I went to 3 classes, one on data foundations, one on overseeing the superintendency, and the other one on conflict resolution techniques for school boards, which seems to be a timely topic. But this was a great opportunity. I really hope that in the future, the rest of my board colleagues choose to engage in that organization, because it helps you grow and learn as an elected official.
Thank you. First, I'd like to say that, I have no doubt that our district has some areas where they can improve. Who doesn't? We can all improve. My issue is that when you listen to some of our trustees, all you hear is doom and gloom, and you don't hear about the amazing things that are happening in our district. And as our strategic planning company has indicated, you have to prioritize, and you can't tackle every single thing all at one time. We are currently working on setting that vision. We are engaging all of our stakeholders to try and understand where we want to go and how we can support everyone. We're in the midst of engaging with a superintendent search firm. So we're looking at that future leader that we will have here. And we're taking not only the work that we have gathered from the strategic plan, but there will be subsequent surveys and focus groups as well to have input on who we want this new leader to be. And the goal would be that the new superintendent does not, our strategic plan should not change based on who that leader is. We're going to have this strategic plan and this vision in place, and we're going to be able to ask those that we're interviewing how they are going to make that happen. How do they see themselves fitting into that? We're also in the midst of reviewing our policies. So we have a lot going on. We are touching all of the areas that we are tasked to be doing. So with that, I also want to tell you what I have been doing. As you know, I attended the MASB conference with some of my colleagues. And I had the opportunity to attend 2 classes. One was on board operating procedures, and one was on conflict resolution. I was also able to attend part of the annual leadership conference there. And there were some of the highlights included 2 keynote speakers who talked about creating a joy of learning and the importance of curiosity. I had breakout sessions on building a united executive leadership team for your district, labor negotiations, and data analysis, as well as having an opportunity to connect with board members from across the state. I have to say that the conference left me feeling hopeful and re-energized, and I hope that I can continue carrying that through the rest of this year. On Saturday, I was able to attend the robotics event that Trustee Gupta was talking about, and I just want to thank all of the parents, mentors, coaches, and volunteers that participated to make that happen, with the 7 teams from Rochester Middle Schools that were participating there, as well as the other 29 teams from surrounding districts that were there. So a lot of good things that are happening within this district. At this point, we're moving on to members of the administration, and was there Mr. Silveri or anyone have any comments?
All right. So one thing I want to really emphasize, I was going to kind of go down the same path. Some of the folks here have already mentioned some of the activities that have taken place, and there have been some really amazing things going on throughout the district. I will just touch on the Veterans Day celebrations at various buildings in particular, only because I saw how meaningful it was to the veterans who were present, and I was really proud of our buildings, our staff, our students, because it wasn't just perfunctory. It wasn't just, well, it's Veterans Day coming up, so let's just do something for the veterans. It was really meaningful, a little bit emotional at times too, and again, I was just really proud of our folks for recognizing the veterans for the sacrifices and everything that they've done for us over the course of time. I'll say too that again, just in my experiences throughout the district, one thing I want to say about our folks, including, again, I always appreciate seeing staff members here and others. One thing I have come to believe very strongly is that the people that we have in this district are very caring, committed, and they're all about doing what's best for students. And I know that we can't possibly always get it right? We're making decisions constantly. And over the course of a school year, I don't know how many thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of decisions that are made throughout the course of the year on a daily basis, hour by hour. But the one thing I don't question at all is the motivation behind the decisions that are being made. I honestly believe that our everybody who's part of this district is doing what they believe is in the best interest of our students, or they would not be taking those actions, right? So we do have an obligation to be very reflective and to continue to learn from the decisions we made, listen to the feedback we get, consider how we can do better, be better, and we will continue to do that. We have to, right? We just do. What I still hope can happen here at this level of the organization is there are obviously some very strong disagreements about how we should be spending our time, what we should be focusing on, et cetera. I get that, and I really do believe, that everybody here believes in what they're saying. They believe they're right. So I don't think anybody's misrepresenting themselves in that way, but I still have to believe there's got to be a way for us to be able to have dialogue with one another, express our disagreements, talk about the things that we'd like to see happen differently without the animosity seeping in and without it being as harsh as it gets sometimes. So, and we can all be guilty of that at times, right? So I don't even know. I have a lot of experience, but I don't have all the answers for this. So I wish I could sit here now and tell you if we would just do this way, we'd be fine. Right? I don't know that I have those answers, but I do think it's worth continuing to aspire to that and to try to find a way to be able to have those disagreements in a respectful manner and see how we can consider everybody's perspective and have it lead to decisions that are in the best interest of our district. So I think it's important enough that we need to stay hopeful and keep working to find a way to make that happen. And I'm confident that if we continue to try, then we can improve and we can get better at this. So fundamentally, it comes down to what's best for the school district. And as long as I think all of us continue to focus on that, listen to one another, consider our differences, consider different points of view, and ultimately, though, try to come together and make the decisions that we believe collectively are in the best interest of our students first and foremost, but our district overall. We're going to continue to be an outstanding district and take a great district, and I do think it's a great district, and become even better, which we should be aspiring to. So I'm going to remain hopeful and cautiously optimistic, and let's keep at it.
Thank you. We're up to announcements. During this week, there are several dates when a quorum of the board may be in attendance at community events. However, there will be no board business conducted during these events. The dates include Wednesday, November 15th during our Strategic Planning Community Forum, and on November 17th and 19th during theater productions at Adams and Rochester High School. November 22nd through 24th is Thanksgiving recess, and there is no school. On November 27th, there will be a Board of Education closed meeting at 5 p.m., followed by a Board of Education regular meeting at 6 p.m. Both meetings are here at West Middle School. At this time, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting? Moved by Trustee Lekui and with support by Trustee Alsbach. Is there any discussion on this? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's a 7-0 vote. We're adjourned at 8:20 p.m. Thank you, and have a good night.